One. Good afternoon. Mike Haggerty here alongside with Mike Clayton and a special guest today, Kyven Gadson. And Kyven, it's a pleasure to have you on. We've been trying to get this one together for a few weeks, but we finally were able to connect, and I'm so excited to have you on. We've got a backdrop of sports and wrestling going on right now that is pretty amazing. This is a great time of the year. By the time this broadcast, we'll probably be through a good part of it with the NCAA championships and the conference championships. But nonetheless, there's some excitement in front of us still with this next week with the NCAAs prior to the broadcast coming out. We just finished up Division Twos, the conference championships. A lot of wrestling going on. We got the U.S. Open coming up here soon out in Vegas. Man, just wrestling everywhere. But Kyvan, again, welcome to the show, and excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm excited to be here. Just catch up with you guys. It's been a little bit, so
Yeah, too
thank you.
long.
You're certainly welcome. Mike, why don't you tee it up and you be the first to offer up a question or some thoughts with Kyvan on the show here.
Well, Kyvan, like most of our guests, I would imagine we could do about 10 different podcast hours and not even come close to touching the surface. But I was thinking today, I stepped outside right before the podcast and jumped back in, and it was one of those nice days, sunny, 60. And it made me think of freestyle and Greco growing up in Iowa. You stick your head out the gym door, get you a couple of fresh breaths, and then get into your next match. And made me think about, I would love to hear how freestyle and Greco, especially at an early age, growing up in Iowa, how you got into it, and a little bit more about how freestyle and Greco really kind of formed your career, if that's really kind of the pathway that you see it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I guess you got to start with I guess the true love. I didn't start freestyle though until I believe seventh or eighth grade. We started with folk style, went to freestyle, because I guess here, in America, we're the only people that do folk style, and we take a lot of pride in that. And my dad was a Division 1 head wrestling coach, so when he finished up his time at Eastern Michigan, uh, I think he was still just kind of in that flow. But my brother, actually, my older brother, he started in Florida, and he started wrestling doing freestyle and Greco. And so like that's just like something like unique, like in different spots of the US, where sometimes you put more emphasis on different styles and things like that. um,
And where were you? Were you in age wise and
I
wrestling
wasn't
wise?
I wasn't here yet.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
when
All
he
right.
started, I wasn't here yet. And so then when my dad was at Eastern Michigan 1992 to 97. Um, and then when he came back to Iowa City, um, that's when I really started wrestling. But I love freestyle. Like that was always my favorite style growing up. Just the It just always seemed like a freer style for me. Just like in the summer, like you would come practice, you'd have the tournaments on the weekend. There wasn't as many duels, and I don't know if that's something like I didn't enjoy maybe as a younger kid, but my love for freestyle was always there from once I got to compete in it. Like you didn't really have to control people as much, and you could pick someone up with a double, and you could just run them off the mat. You could do big throws. Like there's a lot of more like excitement I felt like personally with freestyle. Greco, on the other hand, arch nemesis. As a kid growing up, I actually lost the one time I had an opportunity to win the state triple crown, which I want to say was like seventh or eighth grade. Uh, I lost in the Greco finals. Guess how many people were in the bracket? Two.
Oh no.
Myself, so I had one folk style state. I won freestyle maybe the weekend before, and then Like at that point, you have to do Greco. And I'm like, Dad, like, what is the point of doing something where you cannot shoot doubles, singles, like you can't ankle pick someone? Um, and I had Willie Miklas. Willie Miklas. I beat him in folk style. He didn't show up, just so this is on the record. Willie did not show up to freestyle. He says he was sick. Um, and then he beat me in Greco, uh, best best of three. So he beat me two straight. I think he had a pretty nasty left-handed headlock. I think the first match he pinned me with it, and then the next match he beat me by points. But I'm super appreciative of the skills and the mindset um, that transpired from that because like I don't think at that age I had an understanding of what failure was supposed to mean, what losing was supposed to mean. It's supposed to be a catalyst for growth, a catalyst for development. And failure is supposed to be your foundation. It should be, in ways, it should be freeing, showing you maybe highlighting weaknesses, areas that you can grow, and not this negative thing that inhibits your growth. And I think at that age, I hadn't come around to the understanding yet that doing Greco will provide you with skills and understanding of yourself and your abilities that you maybe won't get when you're doing the freestyle or the folk style. And I think that's something I hung on to, especially when I got to the senior level when we started collaborating, at Team USA camps and things like that with Greco and spending practices, doing Greco live goes and things like that with the senior and national team for the men's Greco team. I think it provided a lot of benefit for my growth as a wrestler and just for an advocate for the sport. Like everyone isn't going to be a freestyle world champion. That's just the facts, and the more we put kids in situations to be successful and allow them to fail without it being like life threatening or confidence ending, I think the better off we'll be as a sport and as a country in wrestling.
Kyvan, there's a lot of people that that message probably could or should resonate with. That the pathway and the gateway towards future development and success is actually tied directly to losing, as most people see it as essentially terminal or a flaw. You were able to turn that around somewhere. Where do you suppose that came from in your career? Is that partly from something that you learned from teammates, or was that from your dad, who was a tremendous athlete himself and a great coach? But where did that insight come from? How were you able to massage that into your wrestling career?
Um, I think a lot of it came like my sophomore year in high school, and this is probably a, a reiterated story often. Um, I was in I was in the state finals, or I made the state tournament after not making it as a freshman. I didn't even go. I had to sit on the couch at home and watch. So the next year, I made the state tournament. I think I'm ranked third or fourth in the state. Um, the two guys that were absolutely better than me ended up being on the other side. And they were just better than me at that point. There's no other way to spin it. I had wrestled one of the people four times. His name was Michael Kelly. He went to the University of Iowa, was a Division I wrestler. And the other person was Derek St. John. So I think that year I had six losses, one out of class loss, and then four to Michael Kelly during the regular season in districts. And then I had my loss in the state finals to Derek St. John. And I was always pretty hard headed, I would say. Um, didn't know or understand the boundaries uh, that were needed to have a coach athlete father son relationship. And I think my dad and I were trying to figure that out. Um, And when I got beat in the state finals, I think I got beat by like 14 points by Derek, and he was again just better than me at that point. And it was like, I will do whatever you tell me to do, as long as that never happens to me again, or like you're giving me an opportunity, so like I don't ever feel like embarrassed like that again. Uh, I will buy into whatever you're selling. Because he always used to tell me, butt whoopings are free, Jack. That's the the southern part of my dad. But he's like, when you want to listen, I'll be here. It was that simple. I got good enough just by being around the sport, being around certain people. But when I decided that I wanted to really listen to him and to the people around me that might know what they were doing, might have had been there before. Uh, that's when it was just like, all right, just go out there, compete with full heart, full effort, and train and prepare with that same type of energy. And a lot of positive things can happen. It doesn't really guarantee you anything in terms of accolades, but it does guarantee you peace of mind. And I think that's when I really started creating confidence. And since I've been a post grad and a senior level athlete, that's something that I've really tried to, when I do go maybe speak or work with kids, is like, hey, this failure is just a foundation. Let's use it for what it is. Let's not make it life and death. I think that inhibits you to really be yourself and be free. Um, let's look at it as like feedback and information. Um, I like to think I have a thoughtful mind. And so, like, this is all just data. Like, if we're shooting 20 times a match and we're only scoring one of them, why are we only scoring one of them? What does that look like? What do I need to do differently to make that stuff maybe a little bit more efficient? So if I do shoot 20 times, I'm now converting on five of them instead of just one. So yeah, just you get your heart broke all the time in wrestling. like we see it from everyone, from Jordan Burroughs, right, to like I didn't get to see like Bruce and John wrestle, but they weren't undefeated. Like Kale, watched him lose as a kid, even though it wasn't in college. Watched him lose at the like Olympic trials, in that best of three and things like that. And you got to respond. You have to be resilient. You have to show up, and you don't maybe feel like it. And so those lessons are like profound. And I think so many kids often miss that message, especially when they're looking at their favorite wrestlers. Like even the best ones that we have in the country right now, the Spencers, the Davids, the Strachis, the RBYs, like they all have lost, and they've used it as data and feedback. And the more I think we can instill that in our kids, the better they'll be at using that feedback.
Hey, Kyven, for a coach or a parent that's coaching a young guy or a young gal out there, and maybe that conversation isn't quite so constructive right now, and maybe it's a little bit more life and death feeling, right? Because we know, right? You raise your hand, you don't raise your hand. It isn't life or death. Whether you get the D1 scholarship or you don't get it, right? Those aren't life or death situations. You can go on and have a good life, but sometimes it feels like it. And you'd mentioned kind of like that head-to-head riff maybe that you had with your dad. What advice do you have for the coaches and the dads and moms that are looking to have that kind of communication with an athlete? They want the best for them. They want the same things, but they're just not really communicating that well. And maybe the athlete's not willing to listen. Do they just ramp up the volume? Is that how you get it through to your kids?
Um, I think with situations like that, I think our egos can be dangerous. I think when my dad came back from Eastern Michigan, he was used to coaching high level, Division 1 student athletes, right? And you come back and you have a 6-year old, 6.5-year old that's just like, like whatever, dude. Like give me my singlet. Let's go do this. Like I'm not trying to learn. I just wanna run around. I wanna have fun. I want Dippin' Dots, which I didn't often get. at those tournaments. So I think you have to like really like assess yourself. Like as a parent, like am I doing this for me, or am I really trying to instill the traits that wrestling can when it's done right? The hard work, the discipline, the dedication, the resilience. When you lose, being able to respond and come back. Like as a kid, you're in these four people brackets, right? And you might lose once that day, right? Like, can you get yourself to a place where, all right, that happened. Now I need to move on and wrestle this next one with a clear head. How do I do that? What am I saying to myself? So the way I see it is we have to self-assess, like as parents, as coaches. And I think we really have to remove our egos from it. Uh, and I think as a parent, that's our responsibility. As a coach, that's our responsibility. I don't know if a 5, 6, 7 year old has the capacity to do that. So I think as parents, as coaches, as advocates of wrestling, we have to understand that everyone is coming from different situations, and what maybe worked for me growing up uh, might not work for one of the kids that I'm working with, but it might be the perfect recipe for another kid. And so making sure you meet people's needs, where they're at, and that's really hard, especially in a sport as grueling uh, and grindful as wrestling. But it's it's a beautiful thing when you learn how to come through those things, and I think the relationships um, become stronger when you do that.
Kyvan, you obviously had a degree of success as a younger athlete, but there seemed to come a point in your career that all of a sudden it really took off,
Hmm.
and you won a national championship in 2015 against arguably one of the greatest of all times, and so my question, and make then follow that up with being on placing in U.S. Opens and making USA national teams and so on. What took place, or was there something that took place that sort of catapulted you into sort of that next dimension of what the sport represents?
I'm I have this conversation sometimes with myself because I wonder what would have maybe been if my dad hadn't have passed away in 2013, um, or if I had been healthy my whole career, because I got to college coming off a shoulder surgery, or two back-to-back major surgeries, like a meniscus, not a scope, a repair, my junior year of high school. So going into my senior year, first practice back from that, I tear my labrum in my left shoulder, and I wrestle with it my senior year. And so one of the things I appreciate about Yanni is his senior year, he was going to be going for that fifth state title, and they set him out because of his elbow. And I feel like that gave him an opportunity to get healthy and do what he needed to do, so that he was going to be prepared for college and the grind of college and the grind of just senior level wrestling. And I think, had maybe I had a little bit more like thought or foresight on, do you need this state title, or do we want to be greater later? um, but I feel like some of that catalyst was my father passing. But one of the things that I just had to revisit probably this this fall was in probably 2001, I think. Chad Beatty, he wrestled at the University of Iowa. My dad was a athletic director at Wilton, in Wilton, Iowa, and uh, Paul, Chad's dad, and my dad hit it off because my dad just loves to talk to people, and he ends up coaching Chad. Um, and just helping them. And my older brother and Chad would train together, all those things, because I think Wilton is like 30 or 40 minutes outside of Iowa City. And my my dad was gone doing something. I think he might have been at the Geneseo tournament in Illinois, and Paul came over to cut down a tree in our front yard. And Paul was up in the tree. I was watching from our deck on the second story of the house, and I remember the tree falling. Like he was cutting a tree, and the tree just falls down, and Paul's no longer up in that tree, right? And so I'm like 9 years old. My dad told me to stay away while Paul was doing the job, and um, once I see the tree fall, like it hits and everything, and I'm like, hey, I'm like, Paul or Mr. Beatty probably. And there was no response. And so like I remember running down the deck and coming over to the tree and kind of like searching through this. It was a big old like pine cone tree. Um, and um Paul, Mr. Beatty told me, he's like, Kyven, go get your mom. Go get your mom. And I watched I watched them, become paralyzed that day. And my dad didn't come back home, I don't think, right away, but I was scheduled to go wrestle in the tournament that same day. They're like, Kyven, do you want to go wrestle? And I'm like, yeah. And I think like as a kid, like 9 or 10 years old that I didn't want to think about what I just saw. And so I was like, I need to go wrestle. Like so I don't have to think about it. And I think that kind of formed in a way like a trauma bond between myself and wrestling, that I didn't recognize until going back to Wilton for a camp this fall. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I was just kind of like thinking, just driving. I'm like, I always use wrestling as not just a safe place, but a place where I could go take any pain or hurt that I was dealing with. So, for example, like my dad's going through, the cancer. It was just like, all right, it's easy. Like I've been doing this since I was, 9, essentially putting pain into wrestling so that I could come out in a beneficial way. Like you want to put, negative things and try to turn them into positive, right? So if you got a negative sign, put another slash down that. Like, how do you turn it into a positive? And so, um, at times, I feel like that's super important and powerful. Um, but then I'm like, does it really give you the opportunity to understand like what was happening? And I think because that happened at such a young age for me, I didn't recognize that when bad things would happen, um, or you miss this, or you miss this to invest in your career, right? Like you miss a birthday, you miss a birth of a niece or a nephew, all these things, you miss it to invest in something else. And so I would say it probably started a lot earlier than I think, Mike. Um, but when it really started to come, I guess, to like fruition, is after I found out my dad was diagnosed with cancer in 2012, and then it was just like, okay, he got sick. We've invested this time, this energy, into me becoming uh, this great wrestler, student athlete, whatever you want to call it. I need to make sure I'm crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, um, in this professional sense. And so I like really, really locked in on doing the things necessary to prepare and perform at a I think elite level. So
Hmm. Well, how do you follow the difficulties that life can bring a lot of people? And certainly you've had to deal with those difficulties and you've channeled it through wrestling. Um, you used the word trauma bond with wrestling. Do you mind talking a little bit more about that trauma bond and your experience with your life and understanding that? Like, to me, I think a lot of us have probably done that. I was I was 8, and my dad had a heart attack. And when he came back from the hospital with, basically no heart tissue left, the quote was, "Any stress is going to kill your father. So we won't have
Hmm.
stress in the family." So for me, I'd go on the wrestling mat, he'd be in the stands, and I was going to pin you as fast as I could so that I didn't stress him out. I was going to get straight A's so I don't stress him out. And, for me, wrestling, I think you really hit a nerve with me. I think that was my trauma bond with wrestling, was I had to be perfect so that there was no stress, so that my dad could feel good. Um, and wrestling was my ability to take that out for 6 minutes. Whatever I was holding inside, well, I could let that
Absolutely.
out, right? And it
Yeah.
was okay for me to be aggressive and angry and
Yeah.
frustrated on all those emotions. I don't know, you really hit a nerve, so I'm going to shut up and get it back to
No,
you so you can tell me about this more.
no, it's just it's real, Mike. Like it's so real, and we don't understand it like while we're like in it, until you maybe step back and you have some time to go, like just let your shoulders down, um, or let your hair down. You don't understand that's what it is, but based off conversations I had with my dad, um, that I've had with my uncle, who were both, multiple time All Americans, they came from adverse childhood experiences. Like my grandpa on my dad's side was abusive. He was an alcoholic. Um, and if I had to look at the essentially like the 7 or 8 adverse childhood experiences that often come up, whether it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, drug, divorce, all these different things that can affect essentially the makeup of your brain and the things that affect a child. Um, they dealt with a lot of that, you know, where at a time where support for those things was like non-existent. And so, also growing up under below the poverty line, like my dad used to tell me stories about kids calling them, because they were bare feet at times, they called them barefoot barracudas. Like, and just kids being kids but being mean. um, and so they moved to New York, and my dad had the opportunity to wrestle, and uncle had the opportunity to wrestle under Lou Gianni, who's an Olympic alternate, I believe, maybe even Olympian in '64, uh, at Huntington High School, in Long Island. And so that drastically shaped and changed their trajectory. People talk about wrestling saving lives. Like, it it truly does that. It truly changes lives. And if you put the right people, or the right leaders, the right servants, with the right environment, that they're 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 wanting to pour into people, and they're wanting to um, give back. Our sport does miraculous things for people. Like, I have high school teammates that are like, your dad saved my life. And so I'm just super appreciative of that, because I know wrestling was probably a trauma bond for my dad as well, and he loved it. That was this thing that he you uh, you adapt to, because so many things are out of our control. Even your story that you shared, Mike, was something that was out of your control. So it's like, all right, what can we control? I can control how often I go running. I can control how I hit this sweep single. I can control my focus and energy and how I direct it in this 6 minutes and in preparation, so that I'm putting myself in a good opportunity to be successful. And I really believe that's why organizations like Beat the Streets, or like the Harvey Twisters, or the Sunnyside Arizonas, uh, those organizations matter at a very, very high level, because it is giving kids that maybe wouldn't otherwise have an outlet that could be very positive for them, you know, to express, to be, to pour into something that can, um, just keep them on the straight and narrow. Because honestly, if I look at it and I look at myself, if my dad would have been a drug dealer, I probably was going to be the kid that would have been the next in line to do the same thing. Like that was just the bond we had. If he'd have been a CEO, I probably would have ended up being, a CEO or working for the company. And so some of these kids don't have that. And my dad chose or found wrestling. And so I'm wrestling and I love it, like to my core. It's one of the things that's brought me the most joy, the most growth. It's also brought me a ton of, heartache and pain, but I've matured because of this sport, and I want our sport to be more accessible to kids that don't have the means, and I want high level people to be able to pour into those kids that maybe don't have the means to maybe go to the the big time clubs and don't have the finances to travel all the way across the country, but they find a community that allows them to come in and be like, hey, let's use this as an opportunity to grow. Let's use it as an opportunity to build. And I know a lot of wrestlers, like I watched Roman RBY's documentary on flow. Still, like there's a
Right.
lot of probably trauma bonding there, and so it's deep stuff. And like you said, I can very much appreciate now the outlet wrestling gave me to be myself and to kind of curtail that or corral that anger, that frustration, maybe that embarrassment, helplessness in some ways. It allowed me to put it into a place that was positive, and I've been able to use it as like a vehicle for me to advance myself, advance my family, build upon the legacy of my dad and my uncle, and just really try to pour into people just like they do and they did. So
Kyvan, let's take that thought and sort of use it as a segue into sort of like how you've used those tools, how you've taken the lessons of the sport, lessons from your dad, those influential people in your life, and where you're at today. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Kyvan today, and maybe even futuristically, and maybe some insights about how, if you are going to continue in the sport, what does that look like? Give us some insight on where you're headed.
well, at the current moment, I work at the Iowa State University Foundation. I'm the assistant director of development here with one of the units that's like a priority unit or a generalist unit. So we fundraise for everything, whether that's biochemistry, excellence fund, or the Iowa State University Excellence Fund. It's everything fundraising for Iowa State University. And so uh, I interviewed for that in May of 20, was that 22? So yeah, right before the World Team Trials last year. Um, and uh, they offered me an opportunity to come and work in development here, and some people call it advancement fundraising. And so I was super ecstatic for the opportunity, just because I feel like it would provide me with skills and add value to myself that you learn from wrestling, right? Just like the tenacity, the all right, you know, outwork yourself, or outwork yesterday. Then you learn the maybe soft skills, like you already have the grind, right? Like like I need to get this much done. I want to be like this and things like that. You already have that based off of your wrestling acumen and what wrestling teaches us. And so then like learning the soft skills to pair with that has been super beneficial. It's a super awesome place for me to be right now, and I feel like um, I'm supposed to be here. Like it was the perfect time for this opportunity to arise just through a connection uh in a relationship. Like wrestling gives us great relationships, but this, was a relationship that was kind of like outside of wrestling, but they met me while I was a student athlete at Iowa State. And so landed here, started August 1st. And since then, I took, some time away from wrestling, I guess, in a certain sense, in terms of like banging. I was like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore, and just allowing my body to relax. I was coming off another knee surgery in February of 22 last year, when I was getting ready to go to the World Team Trials, and didn't really have that like spark, and my body was just like it didn't feel right, going into to the World Team Trials. And sometimes that's just what it is. But yeah, this it's been super positive. I'm learning a lot. uh I'm getting to understand myself a lot more, and now that I think I gave myself that time away from like banging, um or scrapping, I now get to I've been doing some commentary and some stuff like that, and so I've really enjoyed the commentary and the talking about wrestling. Um, I guess being maybe a media person, for wrestling, I've really enjoyed that, and I'm just gonna manifest it right here. I will see you guys in Kansas City next year as a commentator for ESPN or whoever else, so that yeah, 2024, I feel like I will be covering the NCAA wrestling championships. And so like that's my manifestation in me. And then also with that, I just started doing some, you guys probably know Dwight Henson. So Dwight Henson runs a wrestling club, right out of Ames, called Team Intensity, um, or Central Iowa Wrestling Club. And we've I've been going over there. So like yesterday, I was there, and went over some like freestyle Greco stuff with some with like a group. I was maybe it was like 30, 40 kids, and I was wrestling a high school kid. I'm like, oh, this kid is strong. I And so I'm like, I have to get back. I have to get back into it. Like 30 isn't old enough to not have it anymore, And so I'm like, I'm gonna get back into it, and I'm actually gonna be doing like a 11 week freestyle Greco training session, down, out of Des Moines, where I'm just trying to stay involved. I genuinely love the sport, and I really want to see and give back to, my knowledge and information I've acquired over, um, just like my like I think it was like 20, 25, 24 year career competitively, and then just over the like last 8 years of just post grad stuff. Like I feel like I've acquired a lot of information and knowledge that can be beneficial, whether that's just learning how to talk to, different kids, and different parents and things like that. So I'm really excited for that 11-week opportunity, and just like pouring into people. I find I get a lot of energy from it. And so I'm really excited for that. But as far as anything after that, hopefully there will be some more opportunities. I'm actually, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'm wearing my like Beat the Streets, Chicago, shirt. Mike Powell, shout out to Mike Powell. He gave that to me last year when I came down for the Beat the Streets national duels that were in Chicago. I got to be a guest clinician for that. So who knows? Like maybe there's some opportunities for that, in the state of Iowa, and just opportunity to pour back into, uh, the youth and the communities. So uh, I really I really just enjoy wrestling, and being away from the really grueling part of it in terms of physically. um, has, I think, helped establish that appreciation for me a little bit more than you can sometimes realize when you and your body always feels, broken. So
Kyvan, in that last segment, there was about 10 things I'd love to visit with you about, but, restricted a bit by time. But one, if you come into Kansas City, you always have a place, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
And two, I'm very saddened that you've sort of taken yourself off the mat because all those times that we've talked with you and Dom and had that special relationship, prepping for those big matches at the opens or the qualifiers and etc. So that's second thing. I guess the third thing is that there are just certain people in our sport that go to another level of, and it has to do, I think, with the element of who they are, their character, uh, their their um, their personalities, whatever you want to call it. But somebody that kind of exceeds the sport and goes beyond the point of competition. And I've always kind of seen you as one of those guys, right? Like you're a guy that the minute that you won that national championship in 2015, you made a statement about ice cream, right? And I know you've been asked about this 1,000 times, but that sort of speaks to another point about who Kyven Gadson is. Um, Very well spoken, very intelligent guy, but there's also this humorous, fun guy that goes beyond and above that, right? And so I'd love for you to speak to that. Has that always been who Kyven was, or is that something that maybe in the moment it manifests and then it just sort of went from there? But talk to me about that.
Um, I think I've always been goofy, uh, and sometimes it doesn't feel like you can always like appreciate that in a wrestling environment, right? Like you gotta, hey, bring your focus. I need your focus. Like I was the kid that got in trouble. Like, oh, Kyvan's doing great in school, but he's distracting his classmates. He's talking or he's being goofy, and they don't tell you like at school, like, well, you actually, you know what? You can have a job talking to people. Like you can have a job sitting down with people and having conversations and things like that. And so they leave that part out. Like there's definitely a time and a place for all those things. And um, after NCAAs, it was just like I really wanted. I was very energetic, happy in the moment, and it was like that whole tournament, I just was very at peace with the preparation. It's like, I know this won't guarantee that I'm going to win, but I really, really have this strong feeling that I am. Like, very, very strong. And it hadn't been that strong, um, like my junior year. Like, I thought I was going to win, but it just wasn't like my focus wasn't there. And then my sophomore year, it was like, oh, I'm gonna win, But then it was just like my energy wasn't there, dealing with all the things, like my dad passing the day after Big 12s. His funeral was the Monday of the week of the NCAA championship. So like Monday, which would have been yesterday, 10 years ago, we were having a funeral. Thursday,
Wow.
you're wrestling at the NCAA championships in Des Moines, Iowa, So it just like my energy wasn't there. Like I couldn't find the energy. And then like my senior year, I was just very like much at peace. I love joking and like goofing off, but like when it was like time to be serious, it's like I had learned how to channel it and hone it, more so than I think I had done before. It was like when I can be goofy. Like, or like if things were getting hard, I could smile and be like, "You've prepared for this." Like there were times at the tournament where I just looked over and I smiled. Like I'm like, this is actually, I'm enjoying this again. Whereas like I feel like my sophomore junior year, I didn't have the capacity to do that just because of everything I was trying to deal with and navigate through. But I had a ton of support to do it. And so I'm super appreciative of that and those people because a lot of them go unseen in that space. Like you talk about, oftentimes you talk about maybe the parent that's left there, which was my mom, and you talk about the head coach, but there was a lot of training partners, assistant coaches. Like I spent way more time with the medical staff than I spent wrestling. I can promise you that. Like the strength and conditioning staff, spent a lot of time with them too, just to try to put my body into a peak performance. Sports psychologist definitely was in there every week, and not even really talking about wrestling things, but things that would inhibit me from going out to this environment and performing freely. So like there were so many people that like poured into it, but like I really wanted to show, like during that NCAA run, I really wanted to show like my personality. Like there's some interviews from the right after the semis and right after the finals where I got to be a little bit goofy and quirky. That are on like the USA Wrestling webpage that Gary Abbott did from then, where like I think one part was they're like the NCAA person that like sits and tells people how many, the SID sports
Mhm.
information guy was like, all right, we got time for one more question for Kyven. I was like, no, we don't. I'm just like that was like right after the semis, because it was like partially I need to go make sure like my weight is good, you know, but partially like I want you guys to like, it's like always seems so tense, like can we show some different pieces of me? I know people see like the focus and energy and intensity that goes into it, but
Wrestling people too serious? Come
I'm
on.
not saying they're too serious,
Come
but I'm
on.
saying there's definitely a piece of people that need to be shown. And I was really honestly trying to cut like a WWE promo when I did that. Like I was like, I coined it. I'm gonna patent it next. Like I had been getting Muhammad Ali clips all week. And maybe like the last month, like the whole month of March, my brother was sending me like Muhammad Ali clips and sending me texts like, "You're a bad man," like "Rumble, young man, rumble." And when I'm like running off the mat, I'm like yelling like, "I'm a bad man," like not out of cockiness or arrogance, but out of like there was a lot of manifestation and speaking life into the situation before it happened. So it's just like it just kind of like overcame me, and even like down to the detail. I don't know if you guys got to watch the video the NCAA put out last Friday, but it's called My Title, and they go back into what I was thinking, how I was feeling, all these different things about wrestling, and they released that on their socials and stuff, and I literally had designed a shirt for my mom. I was like, Mom, you're going to be on TV on Friday night or Saturday night because we're going to be in the NCAA finals. When I win, they're going to pan to you. Okay. So you need to have this shirt on. It has a picture of me as a kid. Like I got this Cinderella book in my hand, and I'm probably about to throw it because I'm just a reckless child. I'm probably like 4 or 5 in this picture, and I put Mama Gatson on it. So I'm like, there's no way they can mess this up. Like, there's absolutely no way they can mess it up. And when they pan to my mom, which is now my ESPN mom, they did not pick the right lady, right? So
Oh,
they swing the camera right, and my ESPN mom is like, yeah, she's like happy, she's jumping up and down, and I'm like, oh snaps, like they messed that up. And so I'm trying to leverage that to get to Kansas City as well.
hey, we're gonna make that work. I'm gonna have to talk to some of my friends in the
I
media, and,
I
and we got to
I'm
make this happen,
I'm
Kyvan.
trying to leverage all of it. I'm like, hey, that one time where you guys like thought you pinned to my mom, just let me commentate. It'll be a wash. It'll be all good. So, but like, there's a lot of people that go unseen in these processes. And I'm super grateful. Just like you talked about, like nobody would probably know that we have the relationship that we do, Mike, and how many times you put Dom and I through warm ups at the U.S. Open, at the World Team Trials, and the conversations that we've had in hotels just about things away from the mat, just like real life things that matter and that people have to navigate through while still trying to perform and be present where they're at. And so um, there's a lot of people that you can't really go name them off, hand by hand, but super appreciative of those that have poured into my journey. But I always did want to be a person. I was like, you can show your personality. You don't have to when you're tough. It doesn't have to look a certain way. You know that when it needs to be called upon, it'll be called upon. Like I used to color at tournaments in high school. I had like a Minnie Mouse coloring book and a Mickey Mouse coloring book, and that was just my way to keep myself calm. And I was doing it kind of like as a joke, but like it really like you're just like oh you got colored pencils and you're just like kind of chilling, and the looks you get like as a defending undefeated state champ co- coloring at a high school tournament, like people are like what is wrong with this, like or like I saw James Green, who's the head of the development, right? For USA Wrestling, the youth. He reads. He used to read before on matches, and I just have such an appreciation that you don't always have to be listening to energetic or hyped up music. Like you can read, you can color, like you can meditate. Like it doesn't have to look a certain way. And as coaches and as again advocates of the sport, I think if a kid is telling us this is or learning and understanding a kid, like hey, this puts this kid in a better place than if I'm like, hey, I need you to focus, blah blah blah. Like I remember one of my favorite coaches in junior high. Uh, we I'm getting ready to wrestle, and he comes up to me. I got my headgear on, and he goes, "Bow." And I'm like smack right across the face, and I'm just like, okay, I don't really realize what just happened. I go wrestle, and like I come back. This is seventh grade. I'm like, hey, so I don't need that. Like that doesn't work. But it like caught me off guard. But like, like some people need that. Some people that gets them in the space like that they need to be in to execute and perform. And it was just like it caught me so off guard. I'm just like, hey, no. Like we're not doing that again. Like I'm good. I promise I'll be if that's what it takes, like I will make sure I'm prepared.
Isn't
That's
that
freaking
funny how
awesome. Hey,
what's this,
if
what's
Ray
this interesting?
Brenzer, go ahead, Mike.
I would say interesting how you see Dan Gable and he slaps a guy, right? You don't see Dan Gable slapping 10 guys all before he goes on the mat. He's
Yeah.
right. He selected the one that he needed and needed to
Yeah.
get to that moment
He
in that moment.
he knew his athletes. He knew his
Yep.
athletes.
Right.
He knew his athletes. And like that's what I think makes him and like Kale, they're like upper echelon, obviously based off what we've seen, like Gable, 15 over 21 years.
Mhm.
If Kale wins the next, whatever, I think five straight, which I hope he doesn't, because I hope Iowa State gets in there. Um, like if he does that, like it's because he knows him and his staff, they know what their guys need and it's going to be different. Like some person maybe doesn't need to be running, the Carver stairs like everyone else. Whereas like this person, they need every single stair. You know what I mean? And so like understanding that the nuance and the maybe you could call it like chameleon or shape shifting for each athlete to make sure that they're at their peak because we all probably have like a base of what needs to be done, right? Like this is just the hardcore facts of this is what the base is going to be. But then after that, everybody needs a little bit different. This person needs 15 minutes on the bike. This person needs to be talked to and do a whole, a visualization period after practice. They don't need the 15 minutes on the bike. They just need the confidence that the 15 minutes on the bike would give them, and they get that through talking to themselves, affirmations, discussions with themselves, writing themselves letters. Like those things, like are what set, I think, great coaches and great people apart, is understanding that everyone doesn't beat to the same drum.
If Ray Brenzer can set up Gumby in his corner, you're certainly entitled to use your coloring books as long as you desire, Kyvan. So um,
My
let's
dad told me about that one.
that's a story in itself. But let's focus just a moment before we wrap this up today, before we get too long in the tooth. But Kyvan, the majority of our listeners obviously are coaches, either at the youth level, high school, college level. Our USA coaches that dial in to our podcast. Uh, Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are in regards to that coach and athlete bond. Any messages directly that you could speak to our coaches from your experience that might be of some value?
Um, I would say, when looking at it as a coach athlete bond, I think in that space we can do it an injustice. I think you look at it as a um, um, not father son or a mother daughter or father daughter, but um, a pairing. Like a pairing. This person has been, not this child, this person has been paired with you, and you need to handle with intelligence, you need to handle with care, you need to handle with empathy, and you need to handle with awareness of yourself. You need to handle with awareness of them, their situation, what they've gone through. And I think the more you have a collaborative pairing, and there's trust there. Um, like on um my office wall, I have my Kyven's keys to success, and it says trust, learn, compete. TLC, right? Like that's my version of TLC. So everything that I want to be a part of in a high level, um, starts with trust. Like whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's a coaching athlete or a pairing, in that situation, it starts with trust. Whether it's um, a opportunity to talk to a donor, I need to be truthful. I need to be authentic. They need to know who they're talking to. So if I can establish trust in that period, then we have a beautiful foundation. Next, if you have trust, you'll take the time to learn. Like you'll take the time to learn, listen, understand who you're talking with. You'll take the time to learn yourself, because if you learn and are aware of yourself, then you can better yourself. Like if you don't have that awareness, uh, there's a lot of things that can't get done just because you're not aware. Like I can't, if I'm walking in, my shoes untied and I'm not aware, I can't tie it. But that awareness of my shoe being untied will allow me to, take a moment, go tie my shoe so that I don't, step on it and trip or whatever. So trust, learn, and then compete. You know, put the effort out there. Uh, really put yourself uh, under fire a little bit sometimes. Probably more often than not, to perform. And when I say perform, I'm not always talking about being perfect, but I'm saying um, being effort, being efficient, being resilient, being accountable. Like compete in those areas. Like if I want to make sure I'm doing something, then I have to write it down and I have to be accountable to that. And so that's my thing, and those are the things that I'm really trying to adhere to, especially as a father of a 4-year old. Um, I remember we were in the car one day, and we raced to the car, and I'm not letting her win. Like, just not, it's not in me. Like, it's just, because there's gonna be a time. Like, the truth of the matter is, she'll be able to beat me in a foot race way longer than I'll be able to beat her in a foot race. Like, even if I like. at 15, based off what I know about the genetics that she got from my side of the family and the ones that I think that she got from her mom, I'm like, well, I've raced her mom in a foot race and it was awfully close, like way too close for comfort. And so um, you're going to be faster than me. And I'm going to win now because that is going to come to a like a halting, like a abrupt end. And that might be at 40, like depending like on what she decides to do. Like she's 14 now. She'll turn 15 or 5, or she's 4 now. She'll turn 5 in December. So in 10 years when I'm 40, or I'll be 41 at that time, she might legitimately be able to beat me in a foot race. And so the one thing, like I've been following this like building better fathers thing, uh is like keep yourself in shape. And so like that's something like I'm trying to really lock in and zone in on, because when she sees me doing push-ups, she wants to do push-ups. Like if she sees me, eating something healthy, then she wants to eat that. And so just being the example, I think as coaches, and I found this myself, is we were really good at telling our athletes what they need to do because we've been there, but no longer following those same guidelines. And do we have to follow them to the T like we were when we were competing? Absolutely not. But if a kid looks at you and sees that you're not taking care of your mental health by, working out or eating right, or, exercising, meditating, praying, whatever it is that you do to put yourself um, in a positive flow, how do you expect them to go do those things? Because we all have learned, I think a lot of us, anyways, have learned that kids do as they see, not as they hear. And so, as coaches, as parents, we have to make that commitment to not just ourselves, but to our kids, the athletes, people that we're um, paired with, so that they can really see, like, okay, this person is, they're telling me to be elite, they're telling me to show up, they're telling me to do these things, but they're carrying them out. That will make it so much easier than, hey, you need to go run and you haven't ran in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Like I'm like, I took 7 months off from running. I'm like, whew, like I'm telling you, I went to that practice yesterday I'm like, man, like I'm gonna have to tighten it up. I'm gonna have to tighten it up, because like, the truth is, if you coach these kids like well and they're like really invested, they're gonna get you at some point. And they're gonna be, again, just like with a parent, they're gonna be able to get you way longer than you would have been able to get them. But once they get you once, then you can just move them on down the road. Like you gotta go find somebody for them. Like you don't have to let them keep getting you back, like, because it's gonna come back around. They're gonna keep pouring into the sport, right? So once they get you, like, all right, I appreciate that. You got your one get back, and we will find someone else for you, that can challenge you at that level. So
Dwight
I'm
probably runs a pretty good room.
I'm about ready. I'm ready to send the text to my three daughters and my one son, and I'm challenging all of them to a road run right now.
see, see,
They're not
see,
going to. They're not. No, I'm going to show them.
yeah. I'm just saying, like, I think we can do a better job of that, especially in wrestling, a sport that demands and requires so much, just to put yourself in position. It requires so much, and so I think we can do a lot better job of showing that. And so like that's one of the things that I'm looking to get back doing, because I needed a break from it, of that level of um, dedication. Like, yo, why did I say I wanted some ice cream? Because it was scarce. It was scarce during season, like, and now like my background is, like the ice cream I got to create with the creamery, but it was scarce, and so that's what kind of guided that conversation. Like, oh, you don't get ice cream all the time, so yes, you want some, and so I think that would be huge for our sport and for the people in it, because then we just have a healthier environment. Like the I think cutting weight inhibits our sport. It inhibits the growth of it, and there's a part of it that you can do, but the starving a 7-year-old, no, it's not it. Even 12, 13, like, doesn't make any sense. Like, you're putting them in this place where they're not they're going to have a terrible relationship with food, with themselves, and then when they're done, they're going to be like, I can eat whatever I want. There's no rules. And then that happens, and they do it for a year or 2 years or 5 years, and then they're like, oh snaps, I need to address this. And now they're 5 years behind the ball because we haven't established healthy relationships, with them, whether it's their food, whether it's with the coaches that are in their lives. And so, yeah.
Mike, we've got our U15, U17 camp in a little less than a week, right? And I think there's some clips here that we probably ought to share with some of our athletes at that particular time. But Kyven, this has been
Ooh,
incredibly insightful.
thank you. I appreciate you guys for having me on. And
Hold on,
I,
hold
I
on, hold on, hold on. I've got questions for the second hour. I've got a whole list. I've got a whole list. You're going to have to come back. Will you come back sometime?
yeah, I'll definitely come back. This was fun. I really appreciate this. I do think that's something I want to explore, is
Hmm.
the 17 under, 15 under teams, and being able to give back on that level, because then you can travel and you can just pour into people, and you can enjoy the foods in the countries you get to go to,
Yeah.
um
Yeah, there's
just
a
a little
big
bit
need for
more,
that. A big need through
yeah.
our coaches pool at USA Wrestling. So for folks who don't know, if you apply to the coaches pool, then you get put into a batch of coaches who get selected to take the age group teams around the country. Part of the things are, your wrestling success certainly makes a big part of that. Your coaching success, especially if you're coaching in those age ranges and styles that you apply for, but also that coaching certification, that copper, bronze, silver, gold.
Copper rounds, yeah.
All of those go into that conversation when we bring coaches on that tour. So, man, Kyven, that would be awesome to get you involved in that process. We had record-setting numbers of people. I think this year, the women's pool for taking women's age group teams internationally, they had over 70
That's
qualified
awesome.
coaches that were looking to pick. And I think freestyle was second with about 55.
That's
So, yeah,
awesome.
a
That's
lot of
awesome.
big need there, and really cool that, to do that. Great way to give back.
And and I got to do the women's wrestling, and I was growing like incredibly, and I got to commentate the first high school women's state championship down in Coralville at the Extreme Arena. Josh Schamberger always does an amazing job, and his team Think Iowa City do an amazing job bringing opportunities to Coralville and Iowa City to showcase wrestling. So always appreciate them.
Well, for sure, we're going to definitely want to bring you back, Kyven. You've been a special guest, and it's been an amazing journey over the course of this past hour, and we appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you around the circuit of the sport. I know that we'll be able to do that soon. Mike, real quick before we sign off, anything that of note within USA Wrestling and the Coaches College or our council in general?
Yeah, we just wrapped up the Greg Strobel Leadership Academy 30-day challenge. Always so great to work with Jen Baldwin, her sister Christine, Greg's daughters through that program, and Stephanie Jasinski at USA Wrestling and our alumni and donor relation group. Just phenomenal how much work they put into making this happen. And that's to support USA Wrestling's margin of excellence. So there's some things that the typical coach doesn't get a chance to do, and that's where GSLA comes in. Our next Silver Coaches College is going to be mid-June around the Final X. I don't think we're quite sure where it's going to be, but as soon as they set that out, we'll have information ready. And then we do have another U15, U17 age group camp for Greco and freestyle on the boys' side, June 30th to July 5th. And in a few weeks, we'll have that up on the mat.com where people can go in and apply to get involved in that. And Kyven, maybe we'll get you involved and get you out here, fill up one of those coach beds for that camp, because that'd be awesome to have you out.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good. We'll let it go at that, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Great to see you again, Michael and Kyven. Always, a pleasure to visit with you. Love your brother, and hope all is going well with the new job. And look forward to seeing you around the wrestling arena here soon.
Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.